The fluorescent lights in Newark Memorial's ER command station hummed with that 11 p.m. frequency that made everything feel suspended between shifts. Dr. Elena Vance stood at the central monitor array, watching the ventilation system read out, with the kind of focus that made her charge nurse uncomfortable. "You're staring at air pressure readings again," charge nurse Marcus Chen said, not quite joking. "That's the third time tonight." Elena didn't look up. The numbers weren't climbing. They were drifting. Negative pressure in Bay 4 had dropped from 2.5 pascals to 1.8 in 40 minutes. Small. Measurable. Wrong. When's the last time facilities checked the HVAC isolation protocols? Marcus pulled up the maintenance log. January 12th, past inspection. 3 weeks ago. Elena zoomed in on the readout. Bay 4 was their decontamination zone, the room where hazmat cases got processed before entering the main ER. If airflow failed, contaminated air would backflow into the hospital. Basic physics. Critical infrastructure. Marcus leaned against the desk. "Elena, you know how many times facilities has told us the system's redundant? We've got backup filters, positive pressure in the hallways, automatic seals. Redundancy fails when nobody checks the primary." She pulled up the emergency protocols on her tablet. "I'm requesting a systems audit before we accept any more chemical exposure cases. It's Monday night in Newark. We've got 3 ambulances inbound and you want to shut down decon?" The radio on Marcus's hip crackled. "Charge. This is Medic 7. We're 4 minutes out with a level red, male, 34, industrial exposure, unknown chemical, respiratory distress, skin burns on 40% of body surface." Elena's jaw tightened. She keyed her own radio. "Medic 7. This is Dr. Vance. What's the exposure source?" "Chemical plant off Route 21. He was in the mixing room when something ruptured. No hazmat team on scene yet. We've got him in isolation, but he's deteriorating fast." Marcus looked at Elena. "We take him or we bounce him to University." University Hospital was 15 minutes away. 15 minutes this patient didn't have. Elena watched the ventilation readout. Still drifting. Still wrong. "Bring him in," she said. "Bay 4. Full decon protocol." Marcus nodded and walked toward the trauma bay. Elena stayed at the monitor. She pulled up the building schematics, tracing the ventilation pathways. Bay 4's exhaust system fed into a dedicated duct that vented to the roof, completely isolated from the main hospital circulation. As long as negative pressure held, contaminated air stayed contained. As long as. The ER doors hissed open. Medic 7 wheeled in the gurney, 2 paramedics in yellow hazmat suits flanking a patient wrapped in plastic isolation sheeting. The chemical smell hit first. Sharp, acidic, wrong. Elena's eyes watered. "Straight to Bay 4, she directed. "Respiratory. Get a sealed oxygen line ready. Nursing, I want every door between here and decon shut behind them." The team moved. Elena followed at a distance, watching the plastic sheeting ripple with each labored breath the patient took. His skin beneath was mottled red and white, blistering in real time. Whatever he'd been exposed to was still active. Bay 4's door hissed shut. The decon team, 2 nurses in full PPE, began cutting away the patient's clothes while Respiratory connected a filtered oxygen mask. Elena stayed outside the glass, monitoring vitals on the external display. Heart rate, 142, blood pressure, 88/54, oxygen saturation, 79%, and dropping. "Get him on high flow," Elena said through the intercom, "and I want blood gases in 2 minutes." Inside the bay, Nurse Reyes worked fast, starting an IV line while the patient thrashed weakly. The chemical smell was stronger now, even through the sealed door. Elena's throat tightened. She looked up at the ventilation duct. The fan was running. She could see the motion through the grate. But the readout on her tablet showed 1.6 pascals now, still drifting. "Marcus," she said into her radio, "get facilities down here, now." "Elena, the patient's coding, get them now." On the monitor, the patient's oxygen saturation hit 72%. Inside Bay 4, Reyes started chest compressions. The decon protocol required the door stay sealed during active resuscitation. Nobody in, nobody out, until the patient stabilized or the code was called. Elena's radio crackled. "All units, be advised. We have 3 more ambulances inbound, same exposure source. Chemical plant evacuation in progress. ETA 6 to 8 minutes. Marcus appeared beside her. "We can't take 3 more patients in one decon bay. We have 4 isolation rooms, with the same ventilation system." Elena pulled up the schematic again. All 4 rooms shared a trunk line before venting to the roof. If pressure failed in one room, the whole system could cascade. Behind the glass, Reyes continued compressions. 30 seconds, 60. The patient's heart rhythm flatlined, then spiked into V-fib. "Charge the defibrillator," Elena ordered. The overhead speakers crackled to life. Not the calm voice of the hospital operator. Something harder. Faster. Attention all personnel. Code Black. Repeat. Code Black. External contamination event. Decontamination protocols now in effect. All non-essential personnel report to safe zones. This is not a drill. Marcus froze. Code Black? That's facility-wide lockdown. Elena looked at the ventilation readout. 1.4 pascals. The number blinked red. Then the lights in Bay 4 flickered once. And the fan in the ventilation duct stopped. The silence where the ventilation fan should be humming felt louder than the Code Black alarm. Doctor. Elena Vance stared at the motionless duct grate above Bay 4. Inside the sealed room, Nurse Reyes delivered the defibrillator shock. The patient's body arced. The monitor showed sinus rhythm for 3 seconds, then dissolved back into chaos. Marcus, how long until facilities gets here? They're not coming. Marcus held up his radio. All maintenance crews just got rerouted to the loading dock. Some kind of breach protocol. Elena's tablet screen refreshed. The negative pressure reading in Bay 4 had flatlined at 0.2 pascals. Functionally zero, no exhaust, no isolation. Contaminated air was now mixing with the ER's general circulation. She keyed the intercom. Reyes, status. Inside the bay, Reyes looked up from compressions, sweat streaking down her face shield. Still in V-fib. No pulse. We're at 4 minutes. 4 minutes without adequate oxygen. The patient's brain was dying while his skin continued to off-gas whatever chemical had soaked into his tissue. Elena could smell it now. A metallic, solvent bite that shouldn't be reaching the command station. Reyes, after this round, you're coming out. We can still... That's an order. The ventilation's down. You're breathing contaminated air. Reyes hesitated, then nodded. One more shock. One more flat rhythm. She called it at 11:47 p.m. and backed toward the door, peeling off her outer gloves into the hazmat bin. The Bay 4 door hissed open. The chemical smell rolled out like a wave. Seal that, Elena snapped. But 3 nurses were already moving, closing every door between the decon bay and the main ER. The overhead system switched from fluorescent white to the red-tinged emergency lighting. Standard Code Black procedure. Preserve power for critical systems. Marcus's radio erupted. Charge, this is Medic 4 and Medic 9. We're outside the ambulance bay with 3 patients, all critical, all contaminated. We can't bring them through the main entrance. Security's got it locked down. Elena grabbed the radio. This is Dr. Vance. What's the lockdown for? Chemical leak at the plant spread to the surrounding area. Fire department's calling it an atmospheric hazard. We've got cops turning back traffic on McCarter Highway. Marcus pulled up the hospital's external camera feeds. Outside, the ambulance bay was empty except for 2 rigs with flashing lights. Beyond them, Newark's streets were filling with red and blue strobes. A hazmat truck sat sideways across the entrance. They're sealing us in, Elena said quietly. That's protocol, Marcus countered. Keep contamination localized until hazmat clears the scene. We're not the scene, we're the hospital. Her tablet chimed. New message from Hospital Incident Command. All decontamination operations suspended until ventilation systems restored. Do not admit contaminated patients. Elena read it twice. They want us to turn away critical patients. They want us to not poison our own staff. Marcus gestured at Reyes, who was now sitting on a bench, breathing hard, eyes red and watering. She was in there 90 seconds and she's already symptomatic. The ER's main doors rattled. Someone was pounding from outside. Elena walked to the entrance camera feed. A man in street clothes, mid-40s, pressed against the glass. His face was flushed, skin glistening. Behind him, 2 more people stumbled into frame. Walk-ins, Marcus said. From the plant. Elena watched the man's mouth move. He was shouting, but no audio came through. His hands left smudges on the glass. Wet, oily streaks that caught the emergency lights. Her radio crackled. Different voice. Clipped. Administrative. Dr. Vance, this is Deputy Director Carver. Do not unseal any exterior doors. We have protocols for external decontamination. Elena had met Carver twice, both times in budget meetings. He was a hospital administrator, not clinical staff. Where are your decon protocols? Our ventilation is down. Facilities is working on it. Facilities is at the loading dock. A pause. They're addressing the primary breach point. What breach point? Another pause. Longer. The HVAC intake system may have drawn in contaminated exterior air. We're isolating the source. May have. Elena looked at the ventilation readout she'd been monitoring all night. The system hadn't failed randomly. It had failed the moment Code Black was called. Someone had shut it down. Carver, if you isolated the intake, you cut off exhaust. We can't decontaminate patients without airflow. Dr. Vance, I understand your concern, but this decision is above your operational level. Above her operational level. Elena watched the man outside press his face against the glass. His pupils were dilated, lips turning blue. That man needs treatment in the next 10 minutes, or he dies. Then secure him in an external holding area until hazmat arrives. We don't have an external holding area. Dr. Vance, you have your orders. The radio went silent. Marcus looked at her. He's not wrong about the risk. If we open those doors, we pull contaminated air into the ER. No ventilation means no way to clear it. Elena stared at the monitor array. 3 patients outside dying. 3 ambulances waiting with more. 1 dead patient in Bay 4 still off-gassing toxins. Staff already showing symptoms. And a ventilation system shut down by someone who called it a primary breach point. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Sam Wu, her attending backup. Heard code black. Need me to come in? She typed back, stay out. They've sealed the building. Wu replied immediately. Sealed? That's not standard protocol for external contamination. No, it wasn't. Elena pulled up the hospital's emergency operations manual on her tablet, scrolling to section 7, code black procedures. The text was clear. Isolate contaminated zones. Maintain positive pressure in clean areas. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Nothing about sealing the entire building. Nothing about shutting down all ventilation. Marcus's radio crackled again. All personnel, be advised, hazmat ETA now 30 minutes. Repeat 30 minutes. Maintain lockdown status. 30 minutes. Elena looked at the man outside. His knees buckled. He slid down the glass, leaving a wet trail. She turned to Marcus. Something's wrong. Everything's wrong. No, someone shut down our ventilation before we needed it shut down. Dr. Elena Vance pulled up the ventilation system's remote access panel on her tablet. The override screen required a facility's passcode she didn't have, but the diagnostic view was open, read-only access that showed every damper, fan, and pressure sensor in the building. Bay 4. All exhaust dampers closed. Manual override engaged at 11:43 p.m., 4 minutes before the code black announcement. Marcus, look at this. She turned the tablet toward him. Someone shut down decon ventilation before we even knew there was a facility-wide event. Marcus studied the timestamp. Could be automatic. If the system detected contaminated intake air, automatic safety protocols open dampers to exhaust contamination out. They don't seal everything closed. Elena scrolled through the log. Every isolation room in the ER showed the same pattern. Exhaust fans disabled, dampers sealed, negative pressure collapsed. All within a 90-second window. Her radio crackled. Dr. Vance, this is Medic 4. Our patients are crashing. We've got 1 in respiratory arrest. If we don't move them inside in the next 5 minutes... Elena looked at the ER's pressure readout. The main treatment area still showed positive pressure. Air flowing outward, which meant contaminants wouldn't drift into sterile zones. If she opened the ambulance bay door, brought the patients through fast, got them into the already compromised Bay 4. Stand by Medic 4. She switched channels. Carver, we have 3 critical patients outside and 1 in full arrest. I'm bringing them into Bay 4 under emergency medical necessity. Negative. That bay is contaminated. It's already contaminated. The patient who died there is still off-gassing. We either use that space or we let people die in ambulances. Silence. Then, you open that door, you violate containment protocols. I'm invoking crisis standard of care. We treat the salvageable. Another pause. Longer. Elena could hear muffled voices in the background. Carver conferring with someone. Finally, you have 3 minutes. Bay 4 only. Full PPE. Nobody else enters the hot zone. Elena was already moving. Marcus, get me a hazmat suit and 2 respiratory techs who aren't symptomatic. Reyes, you're out. Observation only. Reyes opened her mouth to protest, then coughed. Wet, rattling. She nodded and sat back down. Elena suited up in the supply corridor, pulling on the Tyvek coveralls that smelled like synthetic rubber and old sweat. The respirator mask created a tunnel of her own breathing. Amplified. Mechanical. She hated the sensory isolation. But the alternative was chemical pneumonitis. 2 techs joined her, Patterson and Okoye. Both young, both moving with the kind of controlled panic that came from knowing this wasn't a drill. They wheeled 3 empty gurneys toward the ambulance bay. We go fast, Elena said, her voice muffled through the mask. Load, move, seal. Patterson, you're on airway management. Okoye, vitals and IV access. I'm running triage. She keyed the door release. The ambulance bay entrance hissed open. The chemical smell hit even through the respirator filters. Sharp, caustic, Underneath everything, two paramedics stood beside the ambulances, their faces slick with sweat despite the February cold. They'd been exposed too. "Who's the arrest?" Elena called. "Bay 2. The lead medic yanked open the ambulance door. A woman, maybe 30, lay motionless on the gurney. No chest rise. Cyanotic lips. The cardiac monitor showed a slow, wide rhythm. Agonal. Pre-terminal. "Move her now." Elena grabbed the gurney rail. They rolled into the ER at a run, the wheels rattling across tile. The main corridor was empty. Everyone evacuated to safe zones. Just red emergency lighting and the hollow echo of alarms. Bay 4's door stood open. The dead patient from earlier still lay on the center table, covered with a yellow isolation sheet. No time to move him. They wheeled the woman to the left side, and Patterson started bagging her manually while Okoye slapped on EKG leads. "Asystole," Okoye called. "No pulse." Elena started compressions. Through the suit's gloves, she could feel the woman's ribs flexing. 30 compressions. 2 breaths via bag valve mask. Her own breathing roared in her ears. "Get me the other 2 patients," she ordered between cycles. The paramedics brought them in. One man, semi-conscious, respiratory rate 34 and climbing. One teenage boy, awake but skin covered in chemical burns, whimpering with each breath. Patterson moved to the man. Okoye took the boy. Elena kept compressing. 1 minute. 2. The woman's monitor stayed flat. "Epi," Elena said. Patterson handed her the pre-filled syringe. She pushed it into the IV port and resumed compressions. Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom from outside. "Elena, Hazmat just pushed their ETA to 45 minutes. Traffic's blocked on Route 21. 45 minutes. Elena felt the weight of it. The boy was crying now, his burned skin weeping clear fluid. The semi-conscious man had vomited inside his oxygen mask. Patterson, suction, and remask. Elena checked the woman's monitor. Still asystole. 4 minutes without a pulse. The math was turning against them. Then she made the mistake. Okoye pushed 2 milligrams midazolam on the boy. "He's hyperventilating." Okoye hesitated. "Doctor, if we sedate him and his airway swells, he's going to tear his lung tissue if he doesn't calm down. Give it." Okoye drew up the syringe and pushed it. 20 seconds later, the boy's breathing slowed. 30 seconds, his eyes rolled back. 45 seconds, his oxygen saturation dropped from 88% to 76%. "He's not moving air," Okoye said, voice tight. Elena abandoned the woman, she was gone anyway, and moved to the boy. His airway was swelling shut, chemical burns in his throat, inflammation closing the passage, and she'd just sedated his respiratory drive. "I need an intubation kit. Now." Patterson threw her the kit. Elena tilted the boy's head back, inserted the laryngoscope blade. His airway was a mass of red, blistered tissue. She couldn't see the vocal cords. Suction. Okoye suctioned blood and fluid. Elena tried again. Still couldn't visualize. The boy's oxygen saturation hit 68%. "Crick kit," Elena said. Her hands were steady, but her mind was screaming. She'd done this. She'd sedated a burn patient with a compromised airway. She made the incision through the front of his neck, cutting through skin and membrane, sliding the tube directly into his trachea. Air rushed in. The oxygen saturation climbed. 72%, 78%, 84%. "Bag him," she told Patterson. Behind her, the woman's monitor emitted the long, flat tone of a terminated code. The semi-conscious man had stopped breathing. 3 patients brought in. One she'd killed with a bad call. One already dead. One dying. The intercom crackled. Carver's voice. "Dr. Vance, we're sealing Bay 4 permanently. CDC wants the contaminated space isolated until federal teams arrive." Elena looked around the room. 2 bodies. One teenager on a surgical airway. Chemical smell soaking into everything. "We still have patients in here. You have 5 minutes to stabilize and extract the viable patient. Then we're locking it down." The lights in Bay 4 flickered. Somewhere in the hospital's infrastructure, something was failing in sequence. Dr. Elena Vance lifted the teenage boy onto a clean gurney, her hands still trembling from the emergency cricothyrotomy. Patterson bagged him manually while Okoye pushed the IV pole. They had 4 minutes to get him out before Bay 4 became a sealed tomb. "Move," Elena commanded, and they rolled toward the door. Behind them, the 2 bodies lay motionless under yellow isolation sheets. The chemical smell clung to Elena's suit, to her mask, to the inside of her throat despite the respirator filters. She'd killed the woman by prioritizing the wrong patient. She'd nearly killed the boy by sedating a burn victim. Crisis standard of care, they called it. Choose who lives, accept who dies. It felt like murder. They cleared the doorway. Marcus hit the seal button. Bay 4's door hissed shut with the hydraulic finality of a vault closing. Through the window, Elena could see the shrouded shapes inside. "Get him to ICU," she told Patterson. "Surgical airway needs monitoring every 15 minutes. Patterson nodded and kept moving. Elena peeled off her outer gloves, then her mask. The ER's air tasted metallic. Wrong. She looked up at the ventilation grates. Still motionless, Marcus handed her a water bottle. "You did what you could. I sedated a burn patient with airway compromise. You saved him. After I almost killed him." Elena drank, trying to wash the chemical taste from her mouth. It didn't work. How many more patients are outside? Marcus checked his radio log. Last count, 7 ambulances staged at the perimeter. Fire department won't let them through until hazmat clears the atmospheric contamination. How long? 30 minutes, maybe 40. Elena pulled up the hospital's external camera feeds on her tablet. The ambulance bay was empty now, but beyond the parking lot, she could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles stacked along McCarter Highway. A news helicopter circled overhead, its searchlight cutting through the February darkness. Newark Memorial was an island. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Sam Wu. CDC just issued a shelter-in-place for a 2-mile radius around the chemical plant. What the hell is going on? Elena typed, "Wish I knew." The overhead speakers crackled. "All personnel, this is Hospital Incident Command. Be advised, the New Jersey Department of Health has classified this event as a Level 3 hazmat incident. Federal response teams are en route. Maintain lockdown protocols until further notice." Level 3. That meant multi-casualty unknown agent. Potential for mass contamination. Elena had trained for this scenario in simulations. In the simulations, ventilation systems worked. In the simulations, administrators didn't seal buildings before understanding the threat. She switched her tablet to the facility's diagnostic screen. The ventilation override was still engaged. All dampers closed, all exhaust fans offline. But now a secondary alert had appeared. Main HVAC compressor. Pressure anomaly detected. "Marcus, what's the hospital's backup air supply?" "Rooftop compressor. Feeds the whole building." He looked at her screen. "Why?" Elena zoomed in on the alert. Compressor pressure had dropped from 90 psi to 62 psi in the last 20 minutes. Not catastrophic yet, but trending wrong. Someone's bleeding pressure from the system. Could be a leak. Or sabotage. Marcus stared at her. "You think someone's deliberately—" The lights went out. Complete darkness for 3 seconds. Then the emergency lighting kicked in. Battery-powered floods that cast everything in harsh white and deep shadow. The monitors at the nurse's station flickered, rebooted, came back online. Elena's radio crackled, multiple voices overlapping. "We just lost main power in the ICU, or Suite 2 is on backup. Elevators are down." Marcus keyed his radio. "All units, this is ER charge, report status." Responses came in fragments. ICU had switched to generator power. Operating rooms were stable, but the pharmacy reported their refrigeration units were offline. Labs said their analyzers had shut down mid-test. Elena pulled up the hospital's electrical grid on her tablet. Main power, offline. Generator A, active. Generator B, standby. The hospital had 2 backup generators, each capable of running critical systems for 72 hours. But if both generators failed, her tablet chimed. New alert from facilities. Generator A, fuel pressure low. "That's not possible," Marcus said, reading over her shoulder. "Those generators have 1,000-gallon tanks. We refilled them in January." Elena switched to the fuel monitoring system. Generator A's tank showed 340 gallons. 40 minutes ago, it had shown 920 gallons. "Marcus, we're losing fuel." "How?" "I don't know, but at this rate, Generator A dies in 2 hours. Her radio crackled. Carver's voice tight with controlled panic. "Dr. Vance, we have a situation in the loading dock. I need you down here." Elena didn't move. "What kind of situation?" "Medical situation. Facilities staff. Send them to the ER." "They can't come to the ER. Just get down here." Elena looked at Marcus. He shook his head slightly. A warning. But Carver was the deputy director. And if facilities staff were injured, they might be the only people who knew how to fix the ventilation. "I'm coming." She grabbed a trauma kit from the supply room and headed for the stairs. The elevators were dead, so she took the stairwell, her footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. The loading dock was 2 floors down in the hospital's substructure. The stairwell emergency lights cast swinging shadows. Elena descended fast, pushing through the ground floor door into a service corridor she'd never used before. The walls were unpainted concrete. Pipes and conduit ran exposed along the ceiling. The air smelled like diesel and wet cardboard. The loading dock door was propped open. Beyond it, A truck bay large enough for semi-trailers sat empty except for a single white van with no markings. Two men in facilities uniforms stood beside it, arguing in low voices. Carver stood apart, arms crossed. When he saw Elena, his expression didn't change. "Where's the patient?" Elena asked. Carver pointed to the van. "Inside." Elena approached. The van's rear doors were open. Inside, a man in a facilities uniform lay on the floor, conscious but pale, breathing rapidly. No visible injuries. No chemical smell. "What happened to him?" "Panic attack," one of the facilities workers said. "Started hyperventilating when we were unloading." Elena knelt beside the man. His pupils were normal, pulse elevated but regular. "Unloading what?" Nobody answered. She looked into the van. Past the injured man, stacked against the far wall, were 20 unmarked steel cylinders, each about 3 feet tall, industrial gray. No hazard labels. "What are those?" Elena asked. Carver stepped closer. "That's not your concern. If they're part of the contamination, they're not." His voice had an edge now. "Treat the patient and return to the ER." Elena looked at the cylinders again. They were connected to a manifold system, distribution valves and pressure regulators. This wasn't storage. This was active deployment. One of the cylinders had a small digital gauge visible on its valve. The reading showed 340 psi and dropping. The same pressure loss as the hospital's HVAC system. Elena stood slowly. "Those cylinders are connected to the hospital's air supply." Carver's jaw tightened. "Dr. Vance, you're not fixing the ventilation. You're replacing it." She looked at the manifold, tracing the connections. "What's in those tanks?" "That's classified." "Classified? We're a hospital, not a—" The loading dock's overhead door rattled violently. Someone was pounding from outside, shouting. Elena couldn't make out the words, but the tone was desperate. Carver pulled a radio from his belt. "Security, seal the loading dock perimeter. Nobody gets in." Elena's radio crackled. Marcus, voice urgent. "Elena, we've got walk-ins breaching the south entrance." They broke the glass. "We have contaminated civilians in the main hallway." Dr. Elena Vance ran. The stairwell blurred past. Concrete walls, metal railings, her own ragged breathing amplified in the enclosed space. Behind her, Carver's voice echoed, "Dr. Vance, you're not dismissed." She didn't stop. Marcus's radio transmission replayed in her mind. Contaminated civilians in the main hallway. The ER's south entrance was glass and aluminum, decorative, not secure. If people were desperate enough, sick enough, they'd break through anything. She hit the first-floor corridor at full speed. The emergency lighting cast everything in stark white. 30 feet ahead, she saw them. 4 people stumbling through the shattered remains of the entrance door. Glass covered the floor like ice. The chemical smell rolled in with them, that same acidic metallic bite from Bay 4. 2 security guards stood frozen, hands hovering near panic buttons they'd already pressed. "Get back!" one guard shouted, but his voice carried no authority. The lead figure, a woman in her 50s, business clothes soaked with some dark liquid, lurched toward the ER intake desk. "Please, we can't breathe. The air outside." Elena keyed her radio. "Marcus, I need hazmat suits to the south corridor. 4 civilians, full contamination protocol." "We don't have 4 clean suits. Reyes contaminated 1, you contaminated another." "Then get me what we have." The woman collapsed. Just dropped, knees buckling, head cracking against the tile. Behind her, a man pressed his hands to his throat, wheezing. A teenage girl vomited. Thin, chemical-smelling bile that spread across the floor. Elena grabbed the nearest security guard. "Get me oxygen tanks and non-rebreather masks. Move!" He ran. Elena approached the collapsed woman, pulling on the only barrier she had, nitrile gloves from her pocket. Inadequate. Useless against whatever chemical had soaked through the woman's clothes. But doing nothing wasn't an option. She rolled the woman onto her side. Breathing, shallow, rapid. Pulse, weak, thready. Skin, cold, clammy, with the same red mottling Elena had seen on the first patient. The guard returned with oxygen. Elena fitted a mask over the woman's face and cranked the flow to 15 liters. The woman's breathing didn't improve. Marcus appeared with 2 hazmat suits and Patterson in tow. "This is all we have that's not contaminated. Suit up Patterson and get the girl. I'll take the man." Elena pulled on the Tyvek coveralls, her hands shaking now from adrenaline or early chemical exposure. She couldn't tell which. The respirator mask went on. The world narrowed to the sound of her own breathing. She reached the man just as his wheezing stopped. No air movement. His lips were blue-gray, eyes rolled back. "Patterson, he's arrested!" Elena started compressions. Through the hazmat suit's gloves, the sensation was muffled, disconnected. She couldn't feel if she was compressing deep enough. 30 compressions. She tilted his head back, tried to clear his airway. His mouth tasted like metal and poison even through the barriers. Marcus's voice crackled through her radio. Elena, we have a problem. The main ER is reading positive for airborne contamination. The breach pulled exterior air into the ventilation system. Elena kept compressing. The ventilation system is offline. The hallways aren't. We have passive airflow. Whatever these people brought in is spreading. 1 minute of CPR. 2. The man's chest rose and fell with her compressions, but no heartbeat returned. Behind her, the teenage girl was seizing. Patterson held her head, trying to protect her from injury as her body convulsed. The woman Elena had given oxygen to had stopped breathing entirely. 4 people, all dying, all contaminated, and she'd just let them pull poison into the hospital's core. The overhead speakers crackled, Carver's voice, cold and controlled. Dr. Vance, cease treatment immediately and evacuate to the designated safe zone. Elena didn't stop compressions. I have patients coding, you have contamination spreading to clean areas. That's a direct threat to the entire facility. These people need... Dr. Vance, I'm relieving you of command under emergency health protocols. Security will escort you to quarantine. 2 security guards appeared at the end of the corridor, not the ones from before. These 2 wore tactical vests and carried radios with federal insignia, not hospital security. Elena stopped compressions. The man lay still beneath her, dead or close enough. She looked at Patterson, at Marcus, at the 4 contaminated civilians who'd broken through glass because they were desperate enough to risk anything for help. Marcus, get everyone out of this corridor. Seal it at both ends. Marcus hesitated. What about you? I'm already exposed. Go. Elena, that's an order. He went. Patterson followed, half carrying the seizing girl. The 2 federal guards waited, watching Elena with the kind of patience that meant they'd done this before. She stood slowly, hands raised. I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me what's actually happening. The lead guard, mid-40s, face like carved stone, keyed his radio. Subject is non-compliant. Subject, not doctor, not personnel. Carver's voice crackled back. Detain her. The guards moved forward. Elena backed toward the shattered entrance, glass crunching under her boots. Cold February air rushed through the broken door, carrying more of that chemical smell. Outside, Newark streets were empty except for emergency vehicles and a perimeter of police tape. What's in those cylinders? Elena demanded. The lead guard didn't answer. His partner circled left, cutting off the exit. The hospital's ventilation wasn't contaminated from outside, Elena said, pieces clicking together even as her heart hammered. You shut it down deliberately. You're pumping something else through the air supply. Ma'am, you need to come with us. What are you doing to my hospital? The guard's hand moved to his belt. Not a weapon, but zip cuffs. Restraints. Elena ran. She ducked under his reaching arm, pivoted past the second guard, and sprinted down the south corridor toward the ER's main treatment floor. Behind her, boots pounded. Radio chatter erupted. But she knew this hospital. Every shortcut, every supply closet, She hit the ER command station at full speed. Marcus looked up, startled. Elena, what? Lock down every entrance, nobody in or out without my authorization. Carver just ordered. Carver's not medical staff. I'm the attending physician. This is my ER. She pulled up the facility's diagnostic screen on her tablet. The pressure anomaly in the HVAC system was worse now. 45 psi and dropping. But the compressor wasn't failing. It was being drained into those unmarked cylinders. Marcus grabbed her arm. Elena, those guards are coming. If you don't cooperate, they're not here to help us. She met his eyes. Whatever's happening, we're not the ones being protected. The ER doors hissed open. The 2 federal guards entered, hands on their belts. If you've ever been the one who saw the danger coming while everyone told you to stand down, comment, I saw it. Elena's radio crackled. Unknown voice. Male. Filtered through electronic distortion. Dr. Vance, you're asking the right questions. Check the cylinder's material safety data. Access code 7749. The transmission cut off. Marcus stared at the radio. Who was that? Elena didn't answer. She was already pulling up the hospital's chemical inventory database, typing in the access code. The screen loaded. 1 file. Labeled, Contingency Operation. Authorized personnel only. She opened it, and the world tilted. The file on Dr. Elena Vance's tablet showed a chemical compound designation, BZ47 aerosol variant, experimental anxiolytic agent. Below it, a procurement order dated 3 weeks ago. Sender, Department of Homeland Security, Biodefense Division. Recipient, Newark Memorial Hospital, Deputy Director Alan Carver. Purpose of deployment, mass sedation protocol, civil unrest contingency. Elena read it twice. The words didn't change. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. Mass sedation? They're pumping experimental tranquilizers through our ventilation system. Elena scrolled down. The document outlined a federal program testing aerosolized calming agents in high-density urban facilities, hospitals, transit hubs. The goal: preemptive crowd control during civil emergencies. The chemical plant explosion wasn't the crisis. It was the cover. They used a real contamination event to deploy their test, Elena said, voice hollow. That's why Carver shut down our ventilation before Code Black. He needed to clear the system before introducing BZ-47. The federal guards were 20 feet away now, moving with deliberate calm through the ER. The lead guard spoke into his radio. Target has accessed restricted files. Recommend immediate containment. Elena backed toward the supply corridor, Marcus beside her. If BZ-47 is a sedative, why are people dying? Because it's experimental. She pulled up the chemical's safety data. Side effects listed included respiratory depression, cardiovascular collapse, paradoxical agitation. Fatality rate in initial trials, 12%. 12%. In a hospital with 340 patients currently admitted. That meant, her tablet chimed. New alert from ICU. 3 patients in respiratory distress. Unknown etiology. Another alert from pediatrics. Multiple patients exhibiting altered mental status. The BZ-47 was spreading through the HVAC system, not just the ER, the entire hospital. Marcus, we need to evacuate. Carver locked us down. Nobody leaves. Then we shut off the cylinders. Elena pulled up the facility's schematic, tracing the pneumatic lines from the loading dock to the main air handlers. The manifold connection was in the mechanical room, basement level. She ran, not toward the guards, toward the stairwell. Marcus followed, and behind them, boots pounded on tile. The basement stairwell was darker than the others. Fewer emergency lights, older infrastructure. Elena descended 2 steps at a time, her breath loud in the enclosed space. The chemical taste was stronger here, heavier. They were closer to the source. The mechanical room door was industrial steel, marked authorized personnel only. Elena grabbed the handle. Locked. Marcus pulled a maintenance keycard from his pocket, borrowed from facilities months ago for a late-night supply run. He swiped it. The lock clicked green. Inside the mechanical room was a maze of pipes, ducts, and machinery. The main HVAC units stood silent, massive gray boxes that normally hummed with forced air. But in the corner, a new installation gleamed. 20 steel cylinders connected to a digital manifold system, feeding directly into the hospital's air distribution network. A timer display showed 02.1733. 2 hours, 17 minutes remaining. Elena approached the manifold. The control panel required a passcode. She tried the access code from the file. 7749. Incorrect passcode. 2 attempts remaining. Elena, they're coming. Marcus stood at the door, watching the stairwell. She tried Carver's employee number. Incorrect passcode. 1 attempt remaining. If she failed the next attempt, the system would lock her out entirely. She stared at the keypad, mind racing. What would Carver use? Not his birthday? Not his employee ID? Something he'd remember under pressure. The date of the procurement order, 3 weeks ago. She typed 01/14/26. Access granted. The manifold display lit up. BZ-47 deployment, 67% complete. Current concentration in hospital air supply, 4. 2 parts per million. Target concentration, 6.0 ppm. Elena navigated through the menus. Emergency shutdown option required a 6-digit authorization code she didn't have. Manual valve closure required cutting the pneumatic lines, which would take tools they didn't have. But the timer could be adjusted. She accessed the deployment schedule, currently set to complete at 2 a.m. She changed it. Completion time 11:43 p.m., 20 minutes ago. The system processed the change. Then, the display. Deployment schedule updated. Purge protocol initiating. The cylinders hissed. Pressure gauges dropped rapidly. But instead of shutting down, the manifold opened wider, dumping BZ-47 into the ventilation system at maximum flow rate. No. Elena tried to reverse the command, but the system was locked in purge mode. She just accelerated the release. Marcus grabbed her arm. What did you do? I triggered a safety protocol. It's dumping everything at once. The air in the mechanical room grew thick, sweet-smelling. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. Her hands felt distant, disconnected. We need to get out, Marcus said, but his words came slow, stretched. They stumbled toward the door. The stairwell lights seemed brighter now, pulsing. Elena's legs wouldn't coordinate properly. She grabbed the railing, pulled herself up 1 step. 2. Behind them, the mechanical room's timer display ticked down. 0:47:12. 47 minutes of concentrated BZ-47, flooding the hospital all at once. Her radio crackled, multiple voices overlapping. ICU reporting mass sedation event, pediatrics, all patients unresponsive, or suite, anesthesiologist collapsed during surgery. Elena reached the ground floor. The corridor was empty. Too empty. Where were the guards? Where was everyone? She pushed through the ER doors. The treatment floor was chaos. Patients slumped in chairs, heads lolling. 2 nurses sat on the floor, staring at nothing. A monitor alarm screamed, ignored. Marcus collapsed beside her. Elena, I can't stay awake. She tried to key her radio. Her fingers wouldn't work. The device slipped from her hand, clattered on tile. The ER doors opened. Carver walked in, wearing a military-grade respirator. Behind him, 6 figures in full hazmat suits. Not hospital staff, not federal guards, private contractors. Carver pulled off his mask. His expression was calm. Dr. Vance, you've just accelerated a controlled deployment into an emergency saturation event. 40% of your patients are about to stop breathing. Elena tried to speak. Nothing came out. But I can help you. Carver gestured to the contractors. They carried medical equipment, ventilators, oxygen, emergency airway kits. We can save them. All you have to do is sign the consent form. He held out a tablet. On the screen, a document. Emergency Medical Research Protocol. Informed consent for experimental intervention. What? Intervention? Elena forced the words through numb lips. BZ-47 has an antidote. Experimental, like the agent itself. We need human trial data. Carver smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Your patients are the perfect sample size. Around the ER, people were collapsing. A child's breathing slowed to nothing. An elderly man's monitor flatlined. Carver pushed the tablet closer. Sign, and we start treatment immediately. Refuse, and we document what happens when BZ-47 reaches lethal concentration. Either way, we get our data. Elena's vision tunneled. Her body wouldn't respond. But her mind was screaming. She'd walked straight into their real experiment. Dr. Elena Vance's hand wouldn't move toward the tablet. Not because of the BZ-47 coursing through her bloodstream, though her vision swam and her limbs felt like lead, but because she'd seen this exact scenario before, 4 years ago. Different hospital, different drug, same Homeland Security contractor badges. Fort Dix, she whispered. Carver's smile froze. What? 2022. Joint Base Medical Facility. You tested an aerosolized compound on soldiers during a quarantine exercise. Elena's tongue felt thick, but the memories were crystallizing. 37 personnel, 12 respiratory failures, 3 deaths. They buried the study under national security classification. She'd been a captain then, Army Medical Corps, the youngest physician on the base. When soldiers started seizing in their bunks, she'd demanded answers. Instead, she got a medical discharge, a non-disclosure agreement, and a warning. Keep asking questions and lose your license. She'd signed the NDA, kept her license, spent 4 years pretending she'd forgotten. Carver's expression shifted, calculation replacing false sympathy. Captain Vance, I didn't make the connection. He glanced at his contractors. She was listed as Emily Vance in the Fort Dix files. Elena's my middle name. Started using it after you people destroyed my military career. Her words were slurring, but anger sharpened her focus. You killed 3 soldiers and called it acceptable loss. How many are acceptable here? The Fort Dix protocol had flaws. BZ-47 is refined. It's killing people right now. Elena gestured at the ER. A woman in her 70s had stopped breathing. 2 contractors stood watching, taking notes on tablets, doing nothing. Carver's voice hardened. Sign the consent form. We administer the antidote. Everyone survives. You get your happy ending. And you get human trial data that lets you deploy this in every city in America. We're trying to save lives during civil emergencies. You're weaponizing medicine. Elena's vision blurred. She was losing consciousness. Seconds left, maybe. You turned my hospital into a lab without consent, without oversight. We had authorization from the hospital administrator and federal emergency protocols. You had Carver. Elena looked at the contractors, at their hazmat suits and clinical detachment. But you don't have me. She fell, deliberately, let her legs give out, collapsed onto the tile beside Marcus, who lay motionless, pupils dilated. Her hand found his belt, the radio clipped there. She keyed it with numb fingers and switched to the hospital's PA channel. This is Dr. Elena Vance. Her voice echoed through the overhead speakers, broadcasting to every floor. Newark Memorial is under chemical attack, experimental sedative, BZ-47, federal contractors, patients dying. A contractor lunged for her. She rolled, kept transmitting. Basement mechanical room, cylinders, shut down manifold, anyone still conscious, emergency ventilation override, access code. Her mind grasped for the number she'd used earlier. 774-9. The contractor ripped the radio from her hand, but the message was out. Carver's face had gone white. You just compromised a classified federal operation. I just told the truth. You've committed a felony. Multiple felonies. Arrest me. Elena's vision was tunneling to black. But you'll have to explain why to every news crew outside. She could see it in Carver's expression, the calculation. The PA transmission had been heard by every conscious person in the building, staff, patients, and Newark Memorial had 73 visitors who'd been trapped inside during the lockdown, witnesses, civilians with phones. This wasn't Fort Dix. This wasn't a controlled military base. This was a public hospital in the middle of New Jersey's second-largest city, surrounded by police, fire, media, and 600 people who'd just heard a doctor accuse federal contractors of killing patients with experimental drugs. Carver keyed his own radio. Control. We have a containment breach. Initiate crisis management protocol. One of the contractors spoke quietly. Sir, if we administer the antidote now without signed consent, the data is compromised. The whole trial. The trial's blown. Save who we can and prepare for evacuation. The contractors moved with sudden efficiency. Ventilators appeared. Antidote injections, preloaded syringes with clear liquid. They moved through the ER, identifying the most critical patients first. Elena watched through fading consciousness. The elderly woman got an injection. 15 seconds later, her breathing deepened. 30 seconds, her eyes opened. It worked. The antidote actually worked. But they'd been willing to let people die to protect their data. Marcus stirred beside her. Elena, I'm here. What happened? I broke some rules. She managed a weak smile. Big ones. The ER doors burst open. Not contractors. Not guards. Hospital staff wearing improvised respiratory protection. Surgical masks layered 3 deep, wet towels wrapped around faces. Led by Dr. Sam Wu in a painter's respirator. Someone want to explain why I had to break into the pharmacy's hazmat locker? Wu demanded. Behind him, 6 more physicians and a dozen nurses fanned out across the ER. Carver stepped forward. This area is under federal quarantine. Federal quarantine doesn't override emergency medical care. Wu knelt beside a collapsed patient, checking vitals. And you can explain your jurisdiction to the FBI, who just arrived outside with a very interesting warrant. The FBI has no authority. They do when a whistleblower transmits evidence of unethical human experimentation. Wu looked at Elena. I recorded your PA announcement. Sent it to every contact I have. CDC, State Health Department. My medical school roommate who works at the Newark field office. Elena felt her chest loosen. Not just from the BZ-47 wearing off, from the weight of 4 years of silence finally lifting. Carver's radio crackled. Sir, FBI is demanding entry. Local PD is backing them. We need to extract now. Carver looked at Elena. His expression wasn't anger. It was evaluation. Cold. Clinical. This isn't over, Captain. It's doctor, Elena said. And yes, it is. The contractors packed their equipment with military precision. Carver walked toward the ambulance bay exit, then paused. The antidote only lasts 6 hours. After that, the BZ-47 reactivates. Your patients will need a second dose. He held up a small case. We're taking the remaining supply. Wu stood. You can't watch us. Carver's voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd done this before and would do it again. You want the antidote? Agree to complete the trial protocol. Patient data, blood samples, full documentation. Or spend the next 6 hours watching people die in waves. He walked out. The contractors followed. The door sealed behind them. Wu looked at Elena. Can we synthesize the antidote? Not in 6 hours. Maybe not in 6 days. Elena pushed herself upright. Her head spun, but her mind was clearing. We need that case. They're federal contractors with armed escort. We can if we stop them before they leave the building. Elena grabbed a tablet, pulled up the hospital's security camera feeds. The contractors were moving through the basement corridor toward a service exit that led to the parking structure. But between them and that exit was the mechanical room, where 47 minutes of concentrated BZ-47 was still venting into the air supply. Elena zoomed in on the camera feed. The manifold timer showed 0031.08, and she knew exactly how to use it. Dr. Elena Vance pulled up the basement ventilation schematic on her tablet. The mechanical room fed air to the entire lower level, including the service exit Carver's team was approaching. Wu, take over patient care. Antidote every 6 hours. We've got enough for 4 hours, maybe 5. Then we have 4. Elena sealed a respirator onto her face and handed another to Marcus. We're turning this around. The basement corridor was saturated with the sweet, wrong scent of BZ-47. The mechanical room door stood open, venting the agent into the enclosed space. Perfect. She accessed the HVAC override and isolated the basement. Returns sealed, exhaust fans offline. The level became a closed box. Concentration began to climb. On the security feed, Carver advanced with 6 hazmat contractors, 2 armed escorts, and his military respirator. "You're trapping us down here," Marcus said. "We have respirators." They don't. Elena keyed her radio. "Carver, check your exposure levels." Silence. Then, "What did you do?" "I isolated ventilation. BZ-47 is rising. Your team's already been exposed." One escort staggered. The other grabbed him. "You're bluffing." "No. You have minutes." Carver's voice hardened. "Without us, your hospital dies." "Maybe. But you'll be unconscious when the FBI arrives." Arguments broke out. Panic spread. One escort collapsed. The contractor's movement slowed. "Leave the case," Elena said. "I'll restore airflow." Carver hesitated, then placed the case on the floor. He set a phone on top. "The antidote is yours, but you've made a powerful enemy." They retreated. Elena restored ventilation and opened the case. 20 syringes. Temporary survival. The phone lit up. "Asset compromised. Initiate scorched earth protocol." Her radio erupted. "Records destroyed by sprinklers. Pharmacy systems wiped. Server backups erased." "They're erasing everything," Marcus said. Then a distorted voice cut in. "Server room, 3rd floor, 6 minutes before full wipe." Silence. Elena ran for the stairs. "If we lose this, there's no proof left." Elena Vance took the stairs 3 at a time, respirator still sealed to her face, legs burning from BZ-47 exposure and pure adrenaline. Marcus followed, his breathing ragged over the radio. 6 minutes to the 3rd floor, he gasped. "We're not going to make it." "Yes, we are." Elena hit the 2nd floor landing, pivoted, kept climbing. Her tablet showed 0.0531 remaining. The server room failsafe was counting down in real time. Someone had granted her access to the deletion protocol itself. Someone inside the system. She burst through the 3rd floor door. The corridor was empty, lit by emergency floods that cast harsh shadows. Northeast corner meant past the administrative offices, through the IT department, into the climate-controlled vault where Newark Memorial stored 15 years of digital records. Her boots pounded tile. The chemical taste in her mouth had faded, but her hands still trembled. 4 minutes. The server room door was biometric locked, palm scanner and retinal verification. Elena pressed her hand to the reader. "Access denied. Insufficient clearance." "Damn it!" She tried her employee badge. Nothing. Marcus checked the countdown. 3 minutes 40. Elena keyed her radio. "Unknown contact. If you can hear me, I'm locked out." Static. Then the electronic voice. "Step back from the door." She did. 5 seconds later, the biometric lock blinked green. The door clicked open. Inside, the server room was a cathedral of black metal racks and blinking status lights. Cold air pumped from overhead vents, keeping the equipment at optimal temperature. 20 rows of blade servers hummed with stored data, patient records, financial systems, research databases, surveillance footage. And in the center of the room, sitting at a terminal workstation, was a facilities technician Elena vaguely recognized. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, Newark Memorial ID badge reading, Sarah Chen, Network Systems. She didn't look up from her screen. "You have 3 minutes 17 seconds before the wipe completes. I can stop it, but you need to physically disconnect the backup drives first." Elena stared. "You're the one who's been helping me." Row 7, blue-tagged drives. "Pull them now." Chen's fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision. "I'm fighting a military-grade wipe protocol. It's cascading through the system faster than I can isolate." Marcus was already moving, finding row 7, yanking blue-tagged drives from their slots. Elena joined him, pulling connectors, ignoring the error messages that flashed across nearby monitors. "Why are you helping us?" Elena asked. "Because I was at Fort Dix." Chen's voice was flat, controlled. "Signal Corps. I maintained the base network when they ran the first BZ trials. I saw what they did. I kept quiet because I was 23 and scared, and they made it very clear what happens to whistleblowers." Elena pulled another drive. "What changed?" "I got older, got angrier." Chen typed faster. "When Carver started installing equipment 3 weeks ago, I recognized the signature. Same encrypted protocols, same federal requisition codes. I knew they were running it again. 2 minutes left. Marcus had cleared half the drives. Elena moved to the next rack. Why not go to the authorities yourself? Because I'm a technician. Nobody listens to technicians. Chen's screen showed red alerts multiplying. But a doctor accusing federal contractors of killing patients? That gets attention. Elena yanked the last drive from row 7. How many drives total? 14. You got 12. Chen stood, grabbing a bag from under the desk. The last 2 are in the secured vault. This way. She led them to the back of the server room, where a floor-to-ceiling cage held the hospital's most critical systems. The cage door required another biometric scan, but Chen had already bypassed it. The lock was wedged open with a screwdriver. Inside, 2 drives sat in a reinforced rack labeled Incident Response Backup. Last 72 hours. Elena pulled them both. This is everything? All the evidence? Everything they tried to delete. Patient admissions, pharmacy logs, security footage, facilities manifests showing unauthorized chemical deliveries. Chen loaded the drives into her bag. And the procurement order you accessed. I made 6 redundant copies before they could wipe it. Marcus checked his tablet. 30 seconds. Get out, Chen said. I need to finalize the shutdown sequence. Come with us. Someone has to document what happens next. Go. Elena ran. Marcus followed. Behind them, Chen's fingers flew across the keyboard, isolating systems, severing connections, fighting a digital war against an enemy with unlimited resources. They cleared the server room door as the countdown hit 0. Elena expected an explosion, fire, something dramatic. Instead, just silence. Then Chen emerged, bag of drives slung over her shoulder. Did it work? Elena asked. 70% of the hospital's operational systems just bricked. Electronic medical records are gone. Billing systems crashed. But these, Chen patted the bag. These are safe. Elena's radio crackled. Wu's voice. Elena, FBI is inside the building. They're asking for you specifically. Tell them I'm coming. She looked at Chen. You ready to tell your story? Chen's expression was hard, resolved. I've been ready for 4 years. They took the elevator. Power was spotty, but still functional. The descent felt surreal after the chaos. Just 3 people in a steel box carrying 14 hard drives that could expose a federal conspiracy. The doors opened on the ground floor. The ER had transformed. FBI agents in windbreakers documenting everything, Newark PD securing the perimeter, CDC officials in protective gear taking air samples, and standing in the center, waiting with the kind of patience that meant she'd been briefed on exactly what to expect, was a woman in her 50s wearing an FBI badge and an expression that had seen every kind of lie humanity could manufacture. Special Agent Reyes. She looked at Elena, at the bag of drives, at Chen. Dr. Vance, Ms. Chen, I'm going to need comprehensive statements from both of you. Her gaze was sharp, evaluating. But first, I'm going to need proof that your accusations have merit. Chen opened the bag, and Elena realized that proof was only the beginning, because on the far side of the ER, surrounded by lawyers and federal liaisons, stood Deputy Director Alan Carver. He was back, and he was smiling. Special Agent Reyes took the first hard drive from Sarah Chen's bag and handed it to a forensic technician. Across the ER, Deputy Director Alan Carver watched with the calm of a man who'd already calculated every possible outcome. Dr. Elena Vance's stomach tightened. He shouldn't be here. He should be running, hiding, destroying evidence. Instead, he was smiling. Reyes turned to Elena. Dr. Vance, you transmitted accusations of federal contractors conducting unauthorized human experimentation using an agent called BZ-47. Can you provide physical evidence of this compound? Bay 4. The deceased patients. Blood samples will show. Bay 4 was sealed under quarantine protocols 2 hours ago, Carver interrupted smoothly. All biological samples were transferred to CDC custody for proper analysis. Standard procedure during a Level 3 hazmat incident. Elena's chest constricted. You moved the bodies. We preserved evidence, Carver corrected. Dr. Vance, in your agitated state, may have misinterpreted emergency decontamination procedures as something more sinister. The cylinders in the mechanical room contain medical-grade oxygen, Carver said, delivered under emergency authorization when your ventilation system failed. We were trying to help. That's a lie. Elena turned to Reyes. The procurement order, the chemical specifications, everything's on those drives. Chen stepped forward, pulling out a drive. Procurement order dated January 14, 2026. DHS Biodefense Division. 20 cylinders of BZ-47 experimental aerosol authorized by no one. Carver pulled out his own tablet. Agent Reyes, what Ms. Chen has are fabricated files planted by an unknown actor attempting to discredit a legitimate federal emergency response. We've already provided the Justice Department with authenticated records showing those drives were compromised. Elena felt the ground shifting. You falsified a second set of records. We documented the truth. You're presenting forgeries. Carver's voice carried the weight of institutional authority. Dr. Vance has a history of making unfounded accusations against federal personnel. Her military discharge in 2022 was precipitated by similar behavior at Joint Base Fort Dix. Reyes looked at Elena. Is that accurate? I was forced out because I reported. Elena stopped. The NDA. She'd signed it. 4 years of legally enforced silence. Carver smiled wider. Reported what, Captain? You signed a binding non-disclosure agreement. Anything you claim about Fort Dix is classified, inadmissible, and a federal crime to disclose. The trap closed. If Elena testified about Fort Dix to establish pattern of behavior, she'd violate the NDA and face prosecution. If she stayed silent, her credibility evaporated. Chen's voice cut through. I didn't sign an NDA. Everyone turned. Chen pulled out a second drive. I was Signal Corps at Fort Dix. I maintained the network during the BZ trials. I have copies of every file. Patient outcomes, death certificates, command authorization. She looked at Carver. And I kept them for 4 years, waiting for you to try this again. Carver's smile finally cracked. Anything you retained from Fort Dix is classified under national security, not if it documents criminal activity. Reyes took the drive from Chen. Service members killed during unsanctioned drug trials isn't national security. It's felony manslaughter. You have no jurisdiction over military. I have jurisdiction over civilian conspiracies to conduct human experimentation. Reyes gestured to 2 agents. Deputy Director Carver, you're being detained for questioning regarding violations of the Nuremberg Code and federal research ethics protocols. Carver didn't move. I have diplomatic immunity under Federal Emergency Operations Authority. You can't touch me. We'll see what a judge says about that. Reyes nodded. The agents moved forward. Carver's expression shifted, calculation giving way to cold fury. He looked at Elena. You think you've won? They'll bury this, classify it. My superiors will invoke national security, and this entire investigation disappears. Just like Fort Dix. Maybe, Elena said. But I'm not staying silent this time. You'll lose your license, your career, everything. I already lost that once. I'm done being scared. The agents led Carver away. He didn't resist, just kept his eyes on Elena until the doors closed between them. Reyes turned to Elena and Chen. I need comprehensive statements. Every detail. This is going to be a long night. We have time, Elena said. And for once, I'm going to tell the whole truth. 4 weeks later, Dr. Elena Vance stood in front of a Senate subcommittee hearing on federal biodefense oversight. The chamber was packed. Journalists, advocates, military veterans, civilian witnesses. Chen sat beside her, hands folded calmly. The questioning had lasted 6 hours. Elena's throat was raw from talking, but every detail was now public record. Fort Dix, Newark Memorial, the cylinders, the deaths, the cover-up. The subcommittee chairman leaned forward. Dr. Vance, you've made serious accusations. Do you understand the personal and professional consequences if your testimony is found to be— It won't be, Chen interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. Because we have corroboration from 17 additional Fort Dix personnel who've agreed to testify, and medical records from 43 patients exposed to BZ-47. The chairman opened the folder. His expression changed. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory, not yet, but the possibility of it. The possibility that speaking up could actually matter. Outside the hearing room, her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. ER is running smooth. Wu says hi. We're holding down the fort. Another from Dr. Sam Wu. CNN wants an interview. NBC too. You're about to become very famous or very unemployed. Possibly both. Elena smiled. Probably both. But 4 years ago, she'd stayed silent to protect her career. And it had cost her everything that mattered. This time she'd spoken up. And whatever came next, she'd face it without the weight of buried truth crushing her chest. If you've ever had to choose between your career and doing what's right, and you chose right even when it cost you everything, drop a comment below. And if this story reminded you why we fight for transparency in medicine, hit that subscribe button. We need more people willing to speak up when the system fails. Because silence protects power. Truth protects people. The fight's not over. But tonight, in a hospital in Newark, one doctor decided that some lines can't be crossed, no matter who's giving the orders.